Dawn over the steppe. The summer dawn breaks slowly over the rolling steppes of western Russia, painting the endless grassland in shades of amber and gold. It is July 12, 1943, and the world holds its breath, though it does not yet know why. In a few hours, this tranquil expanse near the village of Prokhorovka will witness the largest tank battle in human history. But for now, in these precious moments before sunrise, there is only the whisper of wind through grain and the distant call of larks greeting the morning. Senior Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov stands beside his T-34 tank, breathing in the cool air that carries the scent of wild flowers and summer grass. At 26, he has already lived through 2 years of the most brutal war his nation has ever known. His weathered hands, stained with oil and scarred from countless repairs under fire, rest gently on the warm steel hull of his machine. The tank bears no name. Soviet doctrine discourages such personal attachments. But Dmitry knows every rivet, every weld, every temperamental quirk of this mechanical beast that has kept him alive from Stalingrad to this moment. Around him, the 5th Guards Tank Army settles into the pre-dawn routine that has become as familiar as breathing. Soft voices carry across the steppe as crews perform their morning inspections. The metallic clink of tools, the quiet hum of engines being tested, the rustle of canvas as camouflage netting is adjusted. These sounds blend with the natural symphony of the awakening countryside. To an untrained ear, it might seem almost peaceful, but Dmitry knows better. His loader, a boy named Pavel, who lies about his age to serve, emerges from beneath the tank with grease-blackened fingers and a grin that still holds traces of boyhood wonder. "Oil pressure is good, Comrade Lieutenant," he reports, wiping his hands on a rag that has seen better days. "She's ready for whatever comes." Dmitry nods, studying the horizon where the first pale light reveals the gentle undulations of the steppe. Somewhere out there, perhaps 5 kilometers away, German forces are conducting their own morning rituals. The Wehrmacht's Army Group South, spearheaded by the elite 2 SS Panzer Corps, has been pushing steadily toward Kursk for 9 days now. Their objective is simple in concept, devastating in execution: to pinch off the Kursk salient and trap over 1 million Soviet soldiers in a massive encirclement. But the Red Army has prepared for this moment. For weeks, Marshal Zhukov and his staff have analyzed German intentions, positioning forces with the precision of chess masters. The 5th Guards Tank Army, commanded by General Pavel Rotmistrov, represents the largest concentration of Soviet armor ever assembled. Over 800 tanks and self-propelled guns, supported by infantry and artillery, wait in carefully prepared positions across this seemingly empty landscape. The irony is not lost on Dmitry as he watches the sun climb higher, transforming the morning mist into golden veils that drift across the steppe. This beautiful land, with its rich black earth and endless horizons, has become a killing ground. The very openness that makes it perfect for tank warfare also means there will be nowhere to hide when the shooting starts. His gunner, Sergeant Alexei Petrov, climbs down from the turret and joins him in the growing light. Petrov is a veteran of the Moscow defense, a steady man whose calm demeanor masks nerves of steel. "The new shells arrived during the night," he reports quietly. "Armor-piercing rounds, the good ones from the Urals factory." This detail matters more than civilians might understand. Soviet ammunition quality has been inconsistent throughout the war, with some batches failing to penetrate German armor at ranges where they should have been effective. But the shells Petrov mentions represent the latest improvements in metallurgy and design, each one potentially the difference between survival and death in the coming battle. Dmitry accepts a cup of tea from his driver, Junior Sergeant Mikhail Volkov. No relation, despite the shared surname. The warm liquid helps clear his mind as he considers the tactical situation. Intelligence reports suggest the Germans will attack with their newest tanks. The massive Tiger-I, with its fearsome 88mm gun, and perhaps even the new Panther, rushed into service for this offensive despite ongoing mechanical problems. Against these monsters, the T-34 seems almost delicate, but Dmitry knows his tank's advantages: speed, reliability, and most importantly, numbers. For every German heavy tank, the Soviets can field 3 or 4 T-34s. The mathematics of attrition favor the Red Army, but mathematics offer little comfort to the men who must close to effective range against superior firepower. The radio crackles softly in the turret, carrying routine communications between units. Dmitri climbs up to listen, his trained ear picking out the subtle tensions in familiar voices. Battalion commanders reporting readiness states. Artillery observers confirming target coordinates. Air liaison officers coordinating with the Sturmovik squadrons that will provide close support, assuming they can penetrate the Luftwaffe's fighter screen. As the morning progresses, the steppe comes alive with controlled activity. Camouflage netting is removed and carefully folded. Engines that have been warming at idle are brought up to operating temperature. Tank commanders study their maps one final time, memorizing landmarks and rally points in case radio communication fails. The German attack, when it comes, will likely follow the classic Wehrmacht pattern. Combined arms coordination that has proven devastatingly effective from Poland to the gates of Moscow. Stuka dive bombers will attempt to suppress Soviet artillery positions. Tiger and Panther tanks will advance in carefully coordinated formations, their long-range guns picking off Soviet armor before it can close to effective engagement distance. Supporting infantry will follow in half-tracks, ready to consolidate any breakthrough. But the Red Army has learned hard lessons in 2 years of warfare. Gone are the desperate, poorly coordinated counterattacks that characterized the early months of the invasion. In their place stands a military machine that has absorbed the Wehrmacht's tactical innovations and added improvements of its own. Soviet artillery, once scattered and ineffective, now operates with precision that would have seemed impossible in 1941. Radio communications, previously a German advantage, have improved dramatically with American Lend-Lease equipment. Most importantly, the men have changed. Dmitri sees it in Pavel's steady hands as he loads practice rounds. He hears it in Petrov's calm voice as he calls out range estimates. These are no longer the confused, undertrained soldiers who faced the initial German onslaught. They are veterans, hardened by combat and motivated by the knowledge that they defend their homeland against an enemy that has shown no mercy to soldier or civilian. The sun climbs higher, burning away the morning mist and revealing the full expanse of the battlefield. To the north, Dmitri can make out the positions of the 18th Tank Corps. To the south, the 29th Tank Corps spreads across several kilometers of front. Between them, his own 5th Guards Tank Army occupies the center, the point where German intelligence suggests the main enemy thrust will fall. A new sound reaches his ears, the distant rumble of aircraft engines. High overhead, barely visible against the brightening sky, reconnaissance planes trace lazy circles. German or Soviet, it's impossible to tell at this distance, but their presence confirms what everyone already knows. The battle will begin soon. Dmitri thinks of his wife Anna, safe in the Ural city where she works in a tank factory. Her letters, when they reach him, speak of 12-hour shifts and meager rations, but also of determination and hope. She builds the tanks he fights in, welding armor plate with the same precision he uses to place his shots. The connection feels profound in ways that transcend the mechanical. His crew gathers around the tank for what might be their final quiet moment together. They don't speak of death. Soviet soldiers rarely do, but the weight of possibility hangs in the warm morning air. Instead, Pavel shows them a photograph of his sister's new baby, born just last month in Leningrad. Petrov shares news from his village, where the spring planting went well despite the shortage of men and horses. These small human moments, Dmitri has learned, matter more than grand speeches about patriotism and duty. They fight not for abstract ideals, but for each other, for the people in those photographs, for the right to return to lives interrupted by war. The radio crackles again, this time with a different tone. Battalion commanders are reporting movement to the west, dust clouds that suggest large formations on the move. The German attack is beginning, though it will be hours before the leading elements reach Soviet positions. The Wehrmacht has learned to advance methodically, with careful reconnaissance and overwhelming firepower concentrated at the point of attack. Dmitri climbs back into his turret, adjusting his headset and checking his periscopes one final time. Around him, 800 other tank commanders are performing identical rituals. The morning that began with such peaceful beauty is about to transform into something else entirely. a test of machines and men that will help determine the fate of nations. The larks still sing in the distance, their voices carrying across the steppe as they have for countless summers. But now their song mingles with the growing rumble of engines and the metallic sounds of an army preparing for battle. History is about to unfold on this quiet stretch of Russian grassland, and Senior Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov, along with thousands of others, will help write it in fire and steel. Inside the Iron Beast, Dmitry takes a final breath of the cool morning air before dropping down through the commander's hatch. The world above, with its singing larks and endless sky, disappears as he descends into the iron belly of his T-34. The transformation is immediate and complete. Gone is the vastness of the steppe, replaced by a cramped mechanical womb barely wider than his shoulders. The smell hits him first, a familiar cocktail of diesel fuel, gun oil, and human sweat that has soaked into every rivet and plate. It's the smell of war machines and the men who operate them, a scent that will linger in his nostrils long after this day ends. "Commander's aboard," he announces, settling into his position behind the gunner. The tank's interior is a maze of controls, ammunition, and equipment, every surface serving multiple purposes. Above his head, the turret ceiling curves downward, forcing him to move in a perpetual crouch. This is no place for the claustrophobic, yet it has become home to 5 men who must function as a single organism. The T-34's fighting compartment measures barely 8 feet from front to back, less than 6 feet wide. Into this space, Soviet engineers have packed a 76.2mm gun, its breech mechanism dominating the center of the turret. Ammunition racks line the walls, high explosive shells nestled beside armor-piercing rounds like deadly metal eggs. Every movement must be calculated, every gesture precise. A careless elbow can trigger switches, a misplaced foot can jam traverse mechanisms. "Mikhail, how's our fuel situation?" Dmitry asks his driver, though he already knows the answer. Fuel discipline has been drummed into every tank commander, not just because supply lines are stretched thin, but because the T-34's thirsty V2 diesel engine can consume nearly 200 liters in a day of combat operations. "Full tanks, Comrade Lieutenant," comes the muffled reply from the driver's compartment. Mikhail Petrov sits isolated in the front of the hull, separated from his crewmates by the massive transmission housing. At 19, he's the youngest member of the crew, but his hands on the controls are steady as a surgeon's. He learned to drive tractors on a collective farm outside Kursk, skills that translated surprisingly well to maneuvering 32 tons of Soviet steel. The driver's position is perhaps the most claustrophobic in the entire tank. Mikhail's world consists of a narrow vision slit and a small periscope, his view of the battlefield reduced to thin horizontal strips. When the shooting starts, even these will be closed, leaving him to navigate by the commander's directions and his own intuition about terrain. It's a position requiring absolute trust in his commander's eyes and voice, trust in his own ability to keep the tank moving when movement means survival. To Dmitry's right sits Sergeant Boris Kozlov, the gunner. At 28, he's the oldest member of the crew, a veteran of the desperate fighting around Moscow 2 winters ago. His weathered hands rest on the gun controls with the familiarity of a musician touching piano keys. The 76.2mm gun is his instrument, and through months of training, he's learned to make it sing with deadly precision. "Range cards updated," Boris reports, adjusting his telescopic sight. The gunner's position offers the best view of the battlefield, but it's a view filtered through optics and measured in range estimates. Boris must translate the chaos of combat into mathematical calculations. Deflection angles, range estimates, ammunition selection. In the heat of battle, he'll have seconds to make decisions that determine whether his crew lives or dies. Behind the gun, loader Pavel Antonov checks the ammunition racks one final time. At 22, he possesses the physical strength and quick reflexes essential for his role. When combat begins, Pavel will become a human machine, lifting 40-pound shells, ramming them into the gun's breech, then stepping clear of the recoil mechanism. A good loader can maintain a rate of fire approaching 8 rounds per minute, but only if he can work in perfect synchronization with his gunner. The loader's position is the most dangerous in the tank. He stands directly beside the gun's recoil path, exposed to hot brass casings and the violent motion of the weapon's mechanism. When the main gun fires, the entire turret fills with acrid smoke and the deafening concussion of the muzzle blast. Pavel has learned to work by feel as much as sight, his hands finding the correct ammunition type even when smoke obscures his vision. Finally, there's radio operator Alexei Volgin, positioned in the hull beside the driver. His world is one of frequencies and call signs, maintaining the invisible threads of communication that bind individual tanks into cohesive formations. The radio equipment is temperamental. Soviet electronics lag behind German technology, and maintaining contact often requires constant adjustment and nursing of delicate components. As the crew settles into their positions, the T-34 begins to feel less like a machine and more like a living thing. The diesel engine's idle creates a subtle vibration that travels through the hull, a mechanical heartbeat that will accompany them into battle. Every crew member feels this rhythm. It becomes part of their breathing, part of their consciousness. The tank's armor plates, sloped at innovative angles that help deflect enemy rounds, create an acoustic chamber that amplifies every sound. The click of switches becomes sharp reports. Spoken words echo with metallic overtones. When the main gun fires, the sound will be beyond description, a physical force that hammers the crew's bodies and temporarily destroys their hearing. Dmitri adjusts his leather helmet and checks his periscopes one final time. Through the rotating vision blocks, he can see other T-34s taking their positions across the steppe. Each tank carries its own crew, 5 men with their own fears, hopes, and families waiting at home. Together, they form part of the 18th Tank Corps, one element in a vast military machine that stretches from the Baltic to the Black Sea. The morning sun climbs higher, its rays beginning to heat the tank's steel hull. By afternoon, the interior temperature will soar past 100 degrees, turning the fighting compartment into an oven. The crew will drink warm water from their canteens and breathe air thick with diesel fumes and cordite smoke. Their uniforms will be soaked with sweat, their hands slippery on controls that must be operated with absolute precision. In the distance, barely visible through the heat shimmer beginning to rise from the steppe, sunflowers nod in vast golden fields. These flowers, planted in peacetime by farmers who never imagined their land would become a battlefield, create an almost surreal backdrop for the gathering storm. Their bright faces turn toward the sun with mechanical precision, a natural phenomenon that will continue regardless of human conflict. The juxtaposition is striking, life and beauty persisting even as thousands of men prepare for mechanized destruction. The sunflowers will witness what unfolds here, silent observers to history's largest tank battle. Some will be crushed beneath steel tracks, others will stand as mute testimony to this day when the fate of nations hung in the balance. Inside the T-34, 5 Soviet soldiers wait for the order that will send them forward into legend. Rumblings of war. The radio crackles to life, breaking the contemplative silence. Senior Lieutenant Volkov presses the headphones closer to his ears as the battalion commander's voice cuts through the static. All units, advance to contact positions, maintain formation spacing, execute on my mark. Around them, the morning air fills with the deep rumble of diesel engines turning over. One by one, the T-34s of the 181st Tank Brigade roar to life, their V-12 engines settling into that distinctive growl that would become the soundtrack of the Eastern Front. Black exhaust plumes rise into the clear sky as 43 tanks prepare to move forward. "Driver, advance," Dmitri commands quietly into his throat microphone. The tank lurches slightly as Pavel engages the transmission. The familiar vibration of steel tracks biting into earth begins, that rhythmic clatter that every tank crew knows by heart. Outside, the peaceful steppe begins to slide past their vision blocks, transformed now from a place of morning serenity into a corridor leading toward destiny. The sunflower fields stretch endlessly on both sides of their advance. These aren't the neat, orderly rows of peacetime agriculture. War has already touched this land. Some fields show the scars of earlier fighting. Shell craters filled with rainwater, sections trampled by previous military movements. Yet remarkably, most of the sunflowers remain intact, their heavy heads tracking the sun's path across the sky with ancient, patient rhythm. As they move deeper into the steppe, the sounds of distant warfare begin to reach them. Artillery fire rumbles on the horizon. Not the sharp crack of direct fire, but the deep, rolling thunder of heavy guns several kilometers away. Each distant explosion sends a barely perceptible tremor through the ground, felt more than heard through the tank's hull. Dmitri finds his mind drifting back to the tank training grounds at Kazan, where he first learned to command a T-34. The instructors there had been veterans of the early fighting, men who'd survived the disasters of 1941 when German panzers had torn through unprepared Soviet formations like paper. They'd taught him more than tactics and gunnery. They'd taught him about fear. Fear keeps you alive, Senior Lieutenant Kozlov had told the officer candidates. The tank commander who isn't afraid is the one who makes fatal mistakes. But you cannot let that fear paralyze you. You must think through it, use it to sharpen your awareness. Now, rolling across the contested steppe toward the largest armored engagement in human history, Dmitri understands what Kozlov meant. The fear is there, a cold knot in his stomach that tightens with each passing kilometer. But alongside it runs something else, a fierce determination born of 2 years of brutal warfare. The radio chatter increases as they advance. Other tank commanders reporting positions, artillery observers calling in coordinates, infantry units confirming their readiness. Through it all, Dmitri can hear the tension in every voice, the careful professionalism of soldiers who know they're moving towards something unprecedented. "Comrade Lieutenant," Alexei's voice comes through the intercom from his position at the radio. "I'm picking up German transmissions on their frequencies. Heavy traffic. They're definitely massing armor ahead of us." This is expected, but still sobering. The intelligence briefings had made it clear. The Germans were throwing everything they had into this offensive. SS Panzer divisions with their heavy Tiger tanks, regular Wehrmacht Panzer units with upgraded Panzer IVs, assault guns, tank destroyers, the most formidable concentration of German armor ever assembled on the Eastern Front. The landscape begins to change subtly as they advance. The sunflower fields give way to more open ground, dotted with small copses of birch and oak trees. In the distance, Dmitri can make out the slight rise in terrain that marks the Prokhorovka Heights, key ground that both sides desperately need to control. Pavel's voice crackles through the intercom. "Sir, the ground's getting softer up ahead. Looks like there was heavy rain here recently." Indeed, the tank tracks of the vehicles ahead of them are beginning to churn up dark, rich earth. The steppe here shows signs of the morning's earlier showers, mud that will complicate movement and make tactical maneuvering more difficult. Tank warfare is often decided by such mundane factors: ground conditions, weather, visibility. As if summoned by these thoughts, the first German artillery shells begin falling in the distance. Dmitri can see the dark fountains of earth erupting perhaps 2 kilometers ahead, ranging shots as enemy observers try to locate the advancing Soviet columns. The sound reaches them seconds later, sharp cracks followed by the whistle of shell fragments. "All stations, this is Hammer Lead," the battalion commander's voice cuts through the radio traffic. "Enemy artillery fire observed to our front. Maintain dispersion, continue advance." The crew's conversation dies away as the reality of combat draws closer. Each man retreats into his own thoughts, his own preparations. In the driver's compartment, Pavel adjusts his seat and checks his vision blocks one more time. Beside him, Yuri runs through his mental checklist of ammunition types and loading procedures. Behind the gun, Victor makes minute adjustments to his sight settings, preparing for the engagement ranges they expect to encounter. Dmitri finds himself studying the terrain ahead with new intensity. Every fold in the ground, every cluster of trees, every slight elevation becomes a potential firing position or cover. This is the ground where careers are made and ended, where tactical decisions measured in seconds can determine the fate of entire divisions. The distant artillery fire grows more intense. Through his commander's cupola, Dmitri can see smoke beginning to rise from several points along the horizon. The preliminary bombardment that precedes major armored engagements, both sides trying to disrupt enemy preparations, knock out command posts, create confusion in the opposing ranks. "Contact report," Alexei announces, monitoring the radio frequencies. Lead elements report German armor in defensive positions approximately 4 kilometers northeast of our current position. 4 kilometers. In tank warfare, that's almost point-blank range. Soon, they'll be able to see the enemy vehicles, to begin the deadly game of maneuver and counter-maneuver that characterizes armored combat. The T-34's 76mm gun is effective at these ranges, but so are the German weapons they'll be facing. The sunflower fields are behind them now, replaced by more open steppe dotted with small farms and villages. Some of these settlements show signs of recent fighting. Roofs collapsed from artillery fire, walls pockmarked with bullet holes. The civilian population has long since fled, leaving behind only empty buildings that will serve as landmarks in the coming battle. As they crest a small rise, Dmitry gets his first clear view of the Prokhorovka battlefield spread out before them. The sight takes his breath away. Hundreds of tanks from both sides maneuvering across several square kilometers of contested ground, their movements raising enormous clouds of dust that drift across the steppe like fog. History is about to be written in steel and fire. Into the fray. The radio crackles with urgent voices as tank commanders across the field report contact with the enemy. Dmitry adjusts his headset, filtering through the cacophony of tactical communications flowing through the airwaves. Call signs blend together. Steel Wolf reports Panzer IV at grid reference. Thunder Battalion, enemy armor advancing from the northwest. The voices carry the controlled tension of men who know they're about to test everything they've trained for. Through his periscope, Dmitry watches the German formations emerge from the heat shimmer like steel mirages. The distinctive angular silhouettes of Panzer IVs and the heavier, more menacing profiles of Tiger tanks become clearer as the distance closes. Each German tank represents months of industrial production, skilled engineering, and tactical doctrine refined through years of warfare. The Wehrmacht's reputation for combined arms coordination is well earned. Their tanks don't operate in isolation, but as part of a carefully orchestrated system of mutual support. Range to lead enemy tank, Dmitry calls to his gunner, Senior Sergeant Kozlov. 1,500 meters and closing, comes the steady reply. Kozlov's voice carries the calm precision of a marksman who understands that accuracy under pressure separates the living from the dead. His hands move across the gun controls with practiced efficiency, traversing the turret in small increments, adjusting elevation, calculating for the movement of both his own tank and the target. The T-34's diesel engine growls as their driver, Corporal Petrov, makes subtle course corrections. The tank's suspension absorbs the irregular terrain of the steppe, but each bump and dip affects gun stability. Modern tank warfare demands a delicate balance, maintaining speed for survival while providing a stable enough platform for accurate gunnery. Petrov has mastered this balance through countless hours of training, his hands and feet working the controls with an intuitive understanding of how the 30-ton machine responds to his commands. Around them, the Soviet formation begins to spread into attack positions. Company commanders issue orders that filter down through the tactical network. First platoon advance by bounds. Second company provide overwatch from the ridgeline. The doctrine they've practiced countless times on training grounds now unfolds across real terrain against a real enemy. Each tank commander must balance adherence to the overall plan with the immediate tactical situation developing in front of his own tank. The first exchange of fire erupts from the northern sector of the battlefield. The distinctive crack of high-velocity tank guns echoes across the steppe, followed by the deeper rumble of explosions. Dmitry feels the familiar tightening in his chest, the physiological response to combat that every tank commander learns to manage. Fear and excitement blend together into a heightened state of awareness where every detail becomes critically important. Contact front, Kozlov reports, his eye pressed to the gunner's sight. Panzer IV hull-down position behind that small rise. Dmitry studies the target through his own optics. The German tank commander has chosen his position well, using the natural terrain to protect most of his vehicle while maintaining a clear field of fire. This is the chess match aspect of tank warfare: positioning, timing, and the ability to recognize tactical opportunities before the enemy does. Steady, steady, Dmitry murmurs, more to himself than his crew. The range continues to close. At 1,200 meters, the likelihood of a first-round hit increases significantly, but so does their own vulnerability to enemy fire. The T-34's sloped armor provides excellent protection against many German weapons, but the Tiger tanks mounting the feared 88mm gun can penetrate their frontal armor at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. The radio erupts with reports from across the battlefield. Tank commanders call out enemy positions, request artillery support, and coordinate movement with adjacent units. Through this electronic nervous system, Dmitry begins to understand the larger tactical picture developing around Prokhorovka. The German advance appears stronger than intelligence estimates suggested. More tanks, better positioning, and aggressive coordination between armor and supporting elements. Armor-piercing loaded, reports their loader, Private Volkov. No relation to Dmitry, despite sharing the common surname. The young soldier's hands move with mechanical precision, selecting the proper ammunition type and sliding the heavy shell into the gun's breech. In the confined space of the T-34's fighting compartment, every movement must be economical and purposeful. A tremendous crash shakes their tank as a German shell impacts the ground nearby. The explosion sends dirt and debris clattering against their armor, and Dmitry feels the concussion through the steel hull. Near misses like this serve as stark reminders of the lethal environment they're operating in, where the difference between life and death often measures in mere meters or seconds. Return fire, Dmitry orders. The T-34's main gun roars, sending a 76mm armor-piercing round downrange at nearly 800 meters per second. The muzzle blast creates a momentary cloud of smoke and dust that obscures their vision, while the recoil rocks the entire tank backward on its suspension. Through his periscope, Dmitry watches for the impact, a skill that requires experience and patience as the flight time at this range approaches 2 full seconds. The round strikes the earth just short of the German position, throwing up a geyser of soil and rock. Close, but not close enough. In tank gunnery, close counts for nothing. Only direct hits on vital areas disable enemy armor effectively. Kozlov immediately begins adjusting his sight picture, accounting for the observed fall of shot and the continued movement of both tanks. Around them, the battle intensifies with each passing minute. The distinctive whine of ricocheting shells mingles with the deeper percussion of direct hits on armor. Tank tracks churn the steppe into clouds of dust that drift across the battlefield like ground fog, reducing visibility and complicating target acquisition for both sides. Movement left calls out their driver. Through the driver's vision port, Petrov has spotted German infantry moving through a nearby gully. These panzer grenadiers represent another threat dimension. Infantry armed with anti-tank weapons who can disable even heavy tanks from close range. Tank warfare requires constant vigilance in all directions. Threats can emerge from any quarter with little warning. The tactical situation continues evolving as both sides commit additional forces to the engagement. What began as a meeting encounter between advance elements has escalated into a full-scale battle involving hundreds of armored vehicles. The radio traffic grows more urgent as unit commanders request reinforcements, report casualties, and attempt to maintain coordination in the growing chaos. Dmitry's crew settles into the rhythm of combat. The repetitive cycle of target acquisition, fire control, and tactical movement that defines armored warfare. Each man focuses on his specialized role while maintaining awareness of the larger situation developing around their tank. Their survival depends not only on individual skill, but on their ability to function as a cohesive team under extreme pressure. The Battle of Prokhorovka has begun in earnest, and history will remember this day as the high watermark of German armored operations on the Eastern Front. Moments of respite. The afternoon sun climbs higher across the contested steppe, casting long shadows between the scattered hulks of disabled tanks. By mid-afternoon, an unexpected quiet settles over this particular sector of the battlefield. The immediate engagement has shifted eastward, following the fluid dynamics of armored warfare where concentrations of force surge and ebb like storm fronts across the landscape. Dmitry's T-34 sits hull down behind a low ridge, engine ticking as it cools. The sudden absence of gunfire feels almost unnatural after hours of thunderous combat. His ears still ring from the percussion of their own main gun, but gradually he becomes aware of smaller sounds. The distant rumble of engines, the metallic ping of cooling steel, the whisper of wind through the tall grass. "Driver, reverse us another 50 meters, he instructs quietly. "Find that depression we passed." The tank lurches backward with a grinding of gears, settling into a shallow fold in the earth that offers concealment from 3 directions. For the first time since dawn, Dmitri allows himself to fully exhale. The crew emerges one by one from their cramped positions, moving with the careful deliberation of men whose bodies have been compressed into mechanical spaces for too long. Pavel, the loader, stretches his arms overhead and winces. His shoulders bear the strain of handling dozens of heavy shells in the confined turret space. Mikhail, their gunner, rubs his eyes. Hours of peering through optical sights have left them red-rimmed and strained. Sergei, their driver, slides out through his forward hatch and immediately begins his post-engagement inspection. His hands move methodically across the tank's road wheels and drive sprockets, checking for damage that might compromise their mobility. In armored warfare, mechanical reliability often determines survival more than tactical skill. "Track tension is good," he reports, running his fingers along the steel links. "No apparent damage to the drivetrain." His voice carries the satisfaction of a craftsman whose tools have performed under extreme stress. They establish a small perimeter around their vehicle, following doctrine even in this moment of relative safety. Dmitri climbs onto the turret roof with his binoculars, scanning the surrounding terrain while his crew tends to immediate needs below. The steppe stretches endlessly in all directions, marked now by the dark smudges of burning vehicles and the geometric scars where tank tracks have churned the earth. From his elevated position, he can see other Soviet tanks scattered across the landscape in similar positions of temporary respite. Some show visible battle damage, scorched paint, missing external equipment, the jagged holes where armor-piercing rounds found their mark but failed to penetrate completely. Each tank represents a small miracle of survival in this vast mechanical lottery. The field kitchen finds them as the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon. A battered truck approaches cautiously, following the low ground where possible, its canvas cover concealing the precious cargo of hot food and ammunition resupply. The arrival of the logistics train transforms the scattered tank positions into something resembling a temporary village. Dmitri watches as his men join the informal queue forming beside the mobile kitchen. Their movements reveal the accumulated stress of combat. The way Pavel favors his left shoulder, how Mikhail blinks repeatedly against the afternoon glare. These are the small tolls extracted by mechanized warfare, beyond the obvious dangers of enemy fire. The cook, a grizzled sergeant whose unit designation has long since been obscured by grease and soot, ladles portions of kasha and black bread into their mess tins. The food is simple, utilitarian, but it carries the profound comfort of sustenance shared among comrades. Steam rises from each portion in the cooling air, and the men find positions on the ground where they can eat while maintaining visual contact with their vehicles. "Tell me about your village, Mikhail," Dmitri says quietly, settling beside his gunner on a patch of grass that hasn't been churned by tank tracks. These moments of human connection become precious during extended combat operations. Brief reminders of the world beyond armored steel and tactical objectives. Mikhail's face softens as he describes the small farming community where he learned to operate machinery, skills that translated naturally to tank gunnery. His father maintained agricultural equipment, teaching him the intimate relationship between mechanical precision and practical results. "Every morning, I would help him calibrate the threshing machines," he explains, "the same patience, the same attention to detail." Pavel shares stories of his family's bakery, where he learned to work quickly under pressure, moving heavy materials in confined spaces. These civilian experiences, seemingly unrelated to warfare, have shaped their effectiveness as a tank crew. The loader's rhythm, developed through years of handling flour sacks and bread ovens, serves him well in the turret's cramped confines. Sergei speaks less, but his hands continue their unconscious inspection of small mechanical components, cleaning his tools, checking the tension of various fittings. His connection to their T-34 runs deeper than mere professional competence. He understands the tank's mechanical personality, the subtle variations in engine note that indicate developing problems, the precise feel of controls under different operational conditions. As evening approaches, Dmitri spreads his tactical map across the tank's front slope, using the fading daylight to study their position within the larger battle. The engagement at Prokhorovka represents more than a single day's fighting. It marks a crucial test of Soviet industrial capacity and tactical doctrine against the Wehrmacht's most experienced armored formations. His finger traces the positions marked in red and blue, representing friendly and enemy units across a front that stretches for dozens of kilometers. Each symbol represents hundreds of men and dozens of vehicles, all maneuvering according to plans developed by staff officers who may never see the actual terrain their forces must cross. The map reveals the battle's essential character. Two massive armored forces grinding against each other across terrain that offers few natural advantages to either side. Victory will depend on logistics, mechanical reliability, and the accumulated skill of thousands of individual crews like his own. It is warfare reduced to its most fundamental elements: steel against steel, will against will. Look here, he points to a cluster of tactical symbols. Tomorrow we'll likely advance toward this ridgeline. His crew gathers around the map, studying the contour lines and tactical markings that will shape their immediate future. This shared understanding of their mission creates a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. The sun settles lower, painting the steppe in shades of gold and amber. Smoke from distant fires creates vertical columns against the evening sky, marking the locations where the day's fighting has left its most permanent scars. Yet there is beauty in this landscape, even marked by war. The endless grass moving in waves before the evening breeze, the vast dome of sky that reduces human conflict to its proper scale. As darkness approaches, they will return to their tank, resuming the vigilant routine of combat operations. But for these precious minutes, they remain simply four men sharing food and conversation on the Russian steppe, connected by bonds forged through shared danger and mutual dependence. The Battle of Prokhorovka continues around them, but in this small pocket of temporary peace, they find the human connections that make such struggles bearable. At the unsung heroes. While Dmitri and his crew find their moment of respite, the true unsung heroes of Prokhorovka work through the fading daylight in makeshift repair depots scattered across the contested steppe. Senior mechanic Pavel Khrushchev wipes grease from his weathered hands as he surveys another damaged T-34, its left track blown apart by a German anti-tank round. The repair depot operates with the organized chaos of a field hospital. Only here, the patients are 30-ton steel machines rather than flesh and blood. Canvas tarps stretch between salvaged poles, creating temporary workshops where mechanics labor over transmission assemblies, engine blocks, and shattered track links. The acrid smell of welding torches mingles with diesel fumes and the metallic tang of hot steel. Pavel has been working for 14 hours straight, moving from one damaged tank to another with the methodical precision of a surgeon. His hands, blackened with oil and scarred from countless repairs, know every bolt and bearing of the T-34's construction. In peacetime, he maintained agricultural tractors in a collective farm outside Voronezh. Now his intimate knowledge of mechanical systems serves a deadlier purpose. "This one can be saved," he murmurs to his assistant, running experienced fingers along the tank's damaged final drive. The young apprentice, barely 18, watches intently as Pavel demonstrates how to properly align the track guides. These lessons, taught in the shadow of battle, carry the weight of life and death. The sound of hammering echoes across the depot as teams of mechanics work to straighten bent armor plates and replace damaged components. Each successful repair means another tank crew can return to the fight. Another tactical asset restored to Soviet armored strength. The mathematics are brutally simple. Every hour of delay means fewer operational vehicles when dawn brings renewed combat. Nearby, a group of mechanics struggles with a more complex problem. A T-34's transmission has been damaged by a near miss from German artillery. Its internal gears ground to useless metal fragments. Pavel approaches, studies the damage, and makes the difficult decision. "Salvage what we can," he instructs quietly. "The engine block is intact. We'll transplant it to the tank from 2nd Battalion." This process of mechanical triage continues throughout the evening. Some tanks require only minor adjustments. A loose track pin here, a damaged periscope there. Others need major reconstruction, their crews working alongside the mechanics to strip usable components from vehicles too damaged to repair. The most severely damaged hulks become sources of spare parts, their sacrifice enabling other machines to fight another day. The mechanics work by lamplight now, their shadows dancing against the canvas walls as welding torches flare and die. Pavel's team has successfully restored 6 tanks to operational status, each one representing hours of careful labor under primitive conditions. Their tools are basic: wrenches, hammers, cutting torches, and the accumulated wisdom of men who understand machinery at its most fundamental level. As the night deepens, Pavel allows himself a brief moment of satisfaction. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, fresh damage to repair, more impossible deadlines to meet. But tonight, 6 tank crews will sleep knowing their mechanical steeds are ready for battle, thanks to the dedicated work of men whose names will never appear in official histories. The repair depot gradually quiets as the most urgent work reaches completion. Mechanics clean their tools with the same care they show their patients, preparing for another day of essential but unrecognized service. In the greater narrative of Prokhorovka, their contribution remains largely invisible. Yet without their tireless efforts, the battle's outcome might have been very different indeed. Pavel extinguishes his work lamp and walks slowly toward his bedroll, another day's duty complete. Echoes of battle. As Pavel's footsteps fade into the darkness, the battlefield settles into an uneasy quiet. Across the contested steppe, in positions marked by the day's violent exchanges, tank crews like Dmitri's maintain their vigilant watch, knowing that dawn will bring renewed combat. Dmitri sits in his commander's cupola, studying the horizon through his periscope. The moon casts long shadows across terrain that 12 hours earlier had thundered with the movement of nearly 800 tanks. Now scattered hulks dot the landscape like monuments to mechanical warfare's terrible arithmetic. His crew sleeps fitfully below. Alexei mutters in his dreams, perhaps reliving the moment his shot found its mark on a Panzer IV's turret ring. Mikhail's breathing carries the rhythm of exhaustion that only combat brings. Even young Victor has finally surrendered to sleep, his loader's enthusiasm tempered by the day's harsh education in warfare's realities. The radio crackles occasionally with position reports and ammunition requests. Dmitri recognizes the voices. Fewer now than this morning. Senior Lieutenant Kozlov's tank took a direct hit during the afternoon engagement. Captain Petrov's crew abandoned their burning T-34 near the railway embankment, 3 men walking away from what had been their home for 6 months. In the distance, perhaps 2 kilometers northeast, the abandoned farmhouse stands silhouetted against the star-filled sky. This morning, it had been a landmark for navigation. A simple wooden structure surrounded by wheat fields that swayed gently in the summer breeze. Now it serves as a casualty collection point, its practical purpose transformed by war's demands. Dmitri remembers passing those wheat fields during the initial advance. The grain stood ready for harvest, golden stalks heavy with the promise of bread for Soviet tables. Tank treads and artillery fire have trampled much of it now. The agricultural cycle interrupted by strategic necessity. He thinks of his father's farm outside Tula, where similar wheat grows in fields his family has worked for generations. The parallel strikes him as both profound and deeply personal. Here at Prokhorovka, they fight not merely for tactical advantage or operational objectives, but for the right of farmers to harvest their grain in peace. The intelligence briefings spoke of German intentions. Army Group South's drive toward the Caucasus oil fields, the strategic imperative to break Soviet defensive lines. But for Dmitri, the conflict has crystallized into something more immediate. Each successful engagement, each tactical victory, represents one step closer to ensuring his father can work his fields without fear of Wehrmacht occupation. A flare illuminates the battlefield briefly, casting harsh white light across the contested ground. In that momentary brightness, Dmitri counts at least 15 tank hulks within his field of vision. Soviet and German machines now indistinguishable in their shared destruction. The mathematics of attrition warfare reduced to its essential elements. His thoughts turn to the men who crewed those silent machines. Tank commanders like himself, making split-second tactical decisions under impossible pressure. Gunners calculating range and deflection while enemy rounds searched for their position. Drivers navigating by instinct through smoke and chaos, trusting their commander's directions completely. The strategic significance of Prokhorovka will be debated by military historians for decades. But for those who fought here, the battle's meaning lies in simpler truths. They held their ground. They prevented German breakthrough. They paid the price that victory demanded. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. The Wehrmacht's offensive capabilities remain formidable, their tactical doctrine proven through 2 years of successful operations. But something fundamental has shifted here on the steppe. The myth of German invincibility has been confronted by Soviet determination and found wanting. Dmitry adjusts his headset and settles deeper into his position. 4 hours until dawn. 4 hours to rest before the battle resumes. In the distance, that abandoned farmhouse keeps its silent vigil, witness to courage, sacrifice, and the enduring hope that wheat fields will once again know only the peaceful rhythm of harvest. Nightfall on Prokhorovka. The stars emerge slowly over Prokhorovka, pinpricks of ancient light piercing the veil of smoke and dust that still hangs in the summer air. Dmitry tilts his head back against the turret rim, watching as the constellations reveal themselves one by one. The same stars that shone over his grandfather's farm in Ukraine, the same patterns that guided merchant ships across the Black Sea centuries before tanks ever rolled across these steppes. There is something profoundly settling about this celestial constancy, this reminder that human conflicts, however momentous they seem to those who fight them, are but brief flickers in the vast sweep of cosmic time. The Milky Way stretches across the dome of sky like a river of light, its ghostly luminescence casting the faintest silver glow over the battlefield below. In this ethereal illumination, the scattered hulks of disabled tanks seem less like instruments of war and more like sleeping giants, mechanical creatures that have simply chosen to rest after their day of thunderous exertion. The wind carries the scent of cooling metal mixed with summer grass, a strange perfume that speaks of both industry and nature finding their uneasy balance on this contested ground. From his position, Dmitry can see the distant glow of mechanic stations where Pavel and his teams continue their nocturnal labors, welding torches flickering like earthbound stars as they coax damaged machines back to life. These points of orange light scattered across the darkness create their own constellation, a human galaxy of determination and skill, each spark representing another tank that might return to battle, another crew that might see another dawn. The rhythmic hammering of metal on metal provides a steady percussion beneath the night symphony, a reminder that even in war's aftermath, the work of preservation continues. The moon rises later, a crescent blade hanging low in the eastern sky, casting long shadows that transform the familiar steppe into a landscape of mystery and dreams. In this silver half-light, the sunflower fields that witnessed such violence just hours ago seem to whisper of resilience. Their heavy heads still turned toward where the sun will rise, their roots still drawing sustenance from soil that has absorbed both tears and blood. Nature, Dmitry reflects, possesses a patience that humans can barely comprehend, an ability to endure and eventually heal that makes even the most devastating battles seem temporary. He thinks of his village now, 200 kilometers to the east, where his mother might be standing in her garden at this very moment, looking up at these same stars and wondering about her son. The distance feels both infinite and negligible. Infinite because of the danger and uncertainty that separates them. Negligible because love and worry travel faster than any tank column, reaching across any battlefield to connect hearts that beat with the same hopes. Perhaps she is tending to her own sunflowers, those smaller domestic cousins of the giant fields that surround Prokhorovka, whispering prayers into the night air that the wind might carry westward to where her boy keeps his lonely vigil. The radio crackles softly with occasional transmissions, position reports, supply requests, the mundane administrative details that continue even in war's pause. But there is something different in the voices tonight, a subtle shift in tone that speaks of confidence slowly returning, of men who have faced the Wehrmacht's finest formations and discovered they could stand their ground. The myth of German invincibility, That psychological weapon that proved as devastating as any panzer division in the early months of the war has been bloodied here on the steppe. Not destroyed, perhaps, but wounded. And a wounded myth begins its inevitable journey toward becoming merely history. In the farmhouse that has served as his reference point throughout this long day, a single window glows faintly. Someone has lit a candle or oil lamp, creating a small beacon of domesticity amid the desolation. Dmitri wonders who might be inside. Perhaps a family that refused to evacuate, choosing to weather the storm in their own home, or maybe a field medic who has claimed the structure as a temporary aid station. Either way, that gentle light speaks of human persistence, of the refusal to let darkness claim complete dominion over the landscape of home. The temperature begins to drop as the night deepens, and Dmitri pulls his tanker's jacket closer around his shoulders. The metal of his T-34 radiates the day's accumulated heat slowly into the cooling air, creating small currents that rustle the grass around the tank's tracks. This mechanical breathing seems almost alive, as if his steel companion is finally allowing itself to rest after hours of violent exertion. There is an odd comfort in this shared exhaustion, this mutual need for restoration before whatever tomorrow might demand. Above them all, the stars continue their ancient dance, indifferent to the territorial ambitions of nations and the tactical brilliance of generals. Polaris holds its steady position, the same navigational constant that guided Dmitri's ancestors across these plains centuries ago, long before borders were drawn or ideologies conceived. In its unwavering presence, he finds a perspective that transcends the immediate urgency of war, a reminder that this land has witnessed countless struggles, countless moments when the fate of civilizations seemed to hang in the balance, and yet the wheat continues to grow, the seasons continue their cycle, and children continue to be born who will know peace. The night air carries distant sounds, the low rumble of supply trucks moving up from the rear, the occasional bark of a guard dog at some distant command post, the soft murmur of voices from other tank crews maintaining their own vigilant watch. These human sounds weave together into a tapestry of shared purpose, each thread representing another soul committed to holding this ground, another heart beating with the determination to see the sunrise bring victory rather than retreat. As the hours pass and the stars wheel slowly overhead, Dmitri feels a profound connection to something larger than himself, larger even than the great battle that has consumed this day. He is part of an unbroken chain of defenders stretching back through Russian history. Soldiers who stood at Borodino against Napoleon, warriors who faced the Mongol hordes on these same steppes, farmers who defended their villages against countless invasions across the centuries. Their courage flows through him like a river of strength, reminding him that this moment, however crucial it seems, is simply his turn to hold the line, his opportunity to add his link to that eternal chain of resistance. The abandoned farmhouse keeps its vigil through the deepening night, its weathered walls bearing silent witness to the courage displayed on these fields, while overhead the ancient constellations continue their patient dance, and in the distance the first mechanics begin preparing for dawn. And somewhere to the east, a mother tends her garden and whispers prayers that travel on the night wind to where her son watches over sleeping sunflowers that will turn their faces toward tomorrow's sun, carrying within their seeds the promise that this land will know peace again, that children will run through these fields without fear, and that the wheat will grow tall and golden under skies unmarked by the smoke of battle.